Welcome to Perusing's Appraisers on Purpose podcast. Our podcast showcases inspiring appraisers and professionals from the industry who are leaders in their field. How did they get to where they are? What have they learned along the way? What can we learn from them? Your host is real estate investor, entrepreneur, and appraiser, Michael Hobbs.
Well, welcome back, and I hope your new year is just as fresh and exciting as it could be. I think that'll be a wonderful perspective we'll also gain today from our guest, and I'm excited to introduce him. But before I do, an important reminder is none of us are in this alone. So let's make sure to share the love, both a little love there on the like button, and more importantly, who's somebody that comes to mind that, that I really need to share this. Maybe you're not the sharing type. So you're taking on this year, being a little more generous. So who is somebody that comes to mind? You're going to just kick this out. But man, this is fantastic. You got to get a hold of this podcast. I love the guests, love hearing from peers. Speaking of peers, Charlie Gress, thank you for joining us today.
Oh, man, I'm grateful to have the opportunity, man. It's a pleasure.
Man, I'm excited. Well, we want to know, Charlie, were you born this way, or how did you get into the valuation and appraisal profession?
I love this question. No, I was not born this way.
You weren't born this way?
No.
Oh, my goodness. Welcome to the crowd.
No, I certainly was not. I've got a couple of colleagues that I know that are fourth generation appraisers.
Did you say fourth?
Yeah.
More than one person's fourth generation? That's amazing.
Yeah, and I know a couple that are like two and,
Wow.
maybe three somewhere, but no, that is not my story. I kind of fell into this, man, by literally luck. I would consider it luck because I love what I do. But yeah, it was. So 1993, I'm selling hats at a hat shop at a sporting apparel store in a mall in Livonia, Michigan. Right?
Wow. Now, are we talking like baseball caps and like ball caps? Or are we talking like a haberdasher kind of stuff?
No, we're talking baseball hats. I put the rhinestones on them with the glue gun, jerseys.
Yeah.
The whole outfits, the starter jackets were big back when I was doing this, right?
Oh,
so
yeah.
It was, 93, get into my senior year in high school, and my sister started working for an appraisal firm as a typist. And she had that job while I finished high school. And then I'm still at the hat shop when I graduate high school, and hadn't made any plans to go to college. And, just was kind of like senior year. I'm a guitar player, so I'm in a band. I'm playing guitar.
Yeah. You're a pretty impactful guy. I mean, how big's your YouTube channel? I mean, you're pretty huge, right? I mean, all the music and, like cutting riffs. I mean, are you and Slash hang out together? Or are we we're going back to like Eddie Van Halen? I mean, like, what are we talking about here?
Oh, we're talking Slash. I mean, Eddie Van Halen was still around.
Yeah.
YouTube channel's a little light these days.
Okay. Well, you're deep in the appraisal profession now, but back in the day.
Back in the day, I wished I would have. I was waiting for Greg Allman to walk into a bar and pick me up and put me in the band, but it didn't happen that way.
Man,
so I'm in selling these hats, and my sister, she knew what I was doing, and she called me and she's like, "Hey, the company I'm at is looking for a courier, someone to drive and deliver appraisals." And I said, "Really?" I said, "Well, what's the job pay?" And at the time, it was like it was more pay than what I was making at the hat shop.
Oh, really?
And she was like, they're going to give you a company car. You don't have to drive your own car, and you just go around and deliver appraisals. And I was like, okay, I had nothing going on. I'm like, this
more
sounds
money
great.
in a car? You're like, game on.
Sounded great, So I went in for an interview and hit it off with the office manager, and I was off and running. And this was at the time, it was probably a bigger firm. It wasn't what it became, and I guess we'll tell
How big was it back then? I mean, you're literally delivering appraisals. Like, did you put a little, a thank you card on each one, or did you deliver cookies with each one? I mean, like, you're literally delivering appraisals.
Hand delivering them. We put them in manila envelopes with a sticker on there. The company that I cut my teeth at that hired me here is Metro West Appraisal.
Okay.
And I'm sure a lot of people know who Metro West Appraisal was. And that's how I started. So, I would drive them to, different banks and mortgage companies that were clients of ours. And
Wow.
There was about 25 people that worked for the firm at the time, half of which, maybe 10, were processing staff. We were handwriting appraisals. Okay. Yes. It was before digital cameras. I would pick up the film from the photo mat, bring it back to the office. The appraisers would go through, slap their photos on with, double sticky tape. And, so they would handwrite them. Girls would type them. We had comp books. So, my job arrayed from, a bunch of different things, but for the most part, I basically hand delivered appraisals and then would pick up, new comp books from the real estate offices. And so, there was a lot of that. But you mentioned cookies. Every Christmas, we would always send our clients these massive baskets of like booze and cookies and sausage and cheese. I mean, all this stuff, right? Love it. Don Russo went all out and would just like take care of his clients. He was always real good about that. And
Charlie, this is a fascinating thing you just touched on. Most people have not made reference to in the past, so I don't want to lose some of our maybe newer people in the profession. What the heck's a comp book, Charlie?
Oh, man. Well, I'm glad you asked. So before we had this wonderful thing called the internet.
You mean there was pre-internet? This is fascinating.
Oh, yeah, man. We had one computer in the office when I started. So the comp books, so basically the way that appraisers got their information for their sales, you could either go to the assessor records and pull up, sales that way in the office, not anywhere else. And then you would have to verify that through the register of deeds. Or we get these comparable sale books. So real estate offices would publish books of sold comparables. And it was a very thin, just think of like the Bible, paper, right? Very thin paper.
Really thin. Oh, yeah.
Very thin. And, you would get these books, they would come out. You could get them quarterly, bi-yearly, or annually. And then for an extra fee, you could get the 30-day book. And Mr. Russo always got the 30-day book. So
Smart man.
I was constantly going into these real estate offices, buying the books, bringing them back to the office. And, depending where you were appraising, it was specific boards. There could be 10 different boards that you need books from. It could be the North Oakland County Board. It could be the Detroit Board. It could be the Dearborn Board. It could be the Grosse Pointe. There was a lot of, just books to be purchased and to be brought back to the office for the appraisers to be able to write their assignments. And this is the best part. So all you got in this comp book, these sold sales, was basically most of the information you would find on MLS today, as far as like lot size, address, so forth. And they would have them listed by, area number, right? So that's how kind of you went through the book and found where your subject was and then looked for the sales that were in the neighborhood. And then you would have to like physically look at a map. We had to scratch arrows on the map from the wax arrows, subject, comparable one, as you're, before you photocopy the map and then bring it, the paper back in your office. So, these books would have that information, and then they would have a small, and I mean small, 1-by-1 black and white photo of the front of the house.
Yep. Wow.
And then just the agent's remarks of what they used to sell the property. And that's all you had.
Wow.
So you would have to, take that information, and then, there was no interior photos. You had to call and talk to that agent on every one of those sales. And then, to be honest with you, what we found out, and what I was taught is that you probably don't want to call the agent on the sale they sold. You want to call the agents on the other comps and ask them if they showed that house, because you wouldn't always get the straight talk from the agent who sold it.
You mean someone might not tell you the truth, Charlie?
That was what we had found out in our experience.
That was goodness.
Passed down to me, and I'm grateful for that, because that really helped. That was a really good tip, is calling the other agents in the area and asking them if they showed it. So that was how it started. And we were hand doing sketches with sketch paper and doing your own calculations. It's come a long way from 1995 when I got into the business and actually started appraising. So so I was a courier. And then, Don one day comes to me and says, "Hey, would you like to become an appraiser?" And I'm a year and a half into this courier gig. I'm liking what I'm doing, but I it's not like I was like going to retire as a courier, right? So I was like, and I had still made no college plans, and I saw what these guys were doing, and I'd spent enough time in the office to realize, they were making good money and they were doing good work, and it was a good crew. We had a great crew of guys and girls in that office, and I thought, why not? I'm like, well, what do I got to do? And he's like, well, you got to take a few classes, and then you're going to train with one of the guys here and for about a year, and then take the exam. And I said, sign me up. Let's do it. So that was in 96, I think. I ended up getting credentialed end of 96.
Oh, wow.
Early 97. It was right around this time of year when I went and took the test. So, yeah, I'm coming up on, what is that now? That'll be 27 years in the business.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah.
That is phenomenal. So you get the tap on the shoulder, the nod, if you will. They're saying, and we're going to date ourselves a little bit, but pulling out your music reference, this is like a Dan Cortez kind of moment.
Yes, it is.
It's literally like, hey, camera guy, come on over here and be in front of the camera on MTV and become one of the huge video DJs, VJs as they used to call them. So, man, that's amazing. So Charles Gress and Dan Cortez share a similar tap on the shoulder.
They do. Almost identical.
How did life change from going? Did you train? Like, did you stop couriering and then go into training to be an appraiser, or were you still doing both, or did you wait until you got all your education and then you moved over into appraisal?
Yeah. So while I was doing classes, so the way they did it is they sent us to wherever the Appraisal Institute was in the country at that time. Yep. We took our core classes with the Appraisal Institute. Okay. Mine were in the first set was in Houston, Texas. And then the second set was in your neck of the woods, Chicago, Illinois.
Okay.
So I took, AB1 down at in Houston. And then when I got done with that class, I took USPAP and something else in Chicago. And so, no, it was like after you got those hours, you just went and paid your fee at the state. You got your, what they called then, it was a valuation specialist when I was getting in the business. That was the pre-licensed credential that you would receive.
Oh, got it.
So I was a valuation specialist. I worked we had an appraiser that had been with Don probably, 8 years at that point. His name was Andy McGinnis. He was, I call my sensei. He took me under his wing and, so I started learning about, different parts of the appraisal process. They would take us out on the road. We did a lot of new construction back then. So that was an area where, basically we worked because it was for Andy, who was doing the obviously the heavy lifting. For me, it was a little easier, for scheduling and things like that for us to, be able to work on those. And so it was just fascinating. I got right into it. At some point, I remember I went in and was talking to Don. And I'll never forget the day. I was just like, I'm thinking to myself, I've just been working with Andy, so I'm just learning one way. I thought, maybe I should work with some other appraisers, and he goes, okay, sounds great. You'll come on the road with me tomorrow. And I was not expecting that. So so Don himself takes me out on the road, and, that was a fun time. It was a busy time back in the late, 90s. We were doing a ton of volume, and, And so anyway, I show up at the house, this was a regular refinance, people in it, and Don's in the driveway. I come up, pull up, and here we go in this house. And, we're walking through it, and I'm sketching out the floor plan. And back then you didn't take interior photos. It was a front rear street. You're out. That's it.
Because what was the technology you were using for photos back then?
35 millimeter camera.
You're like, this expensive stuff.
Right. So front, rear, and street, you're out. And so we go in the house. So basically when you're in the house, there's no photo taking, which that takes a lot of time now at the inspection. So now it's just sketching out the floor plan, taking your notes for the front page of the UR. And, so I'm going through the house, and he kind of like goes one way, and I'm trying to follow him, and he kind of got away from me. And next thing you know, I'm upstairs, and it's a big house with open areas, and I'm measuring, and I'm trying to figure this thing out. And I look down, and his shoes are gone. And so, he had walked through the house and just kind of, left me in the dust, So I'm like, man, I hope I'm doing this right. So I come back out. He calls me over to his car. I get into his car, and he's like, "How'd you do?" And I was like, "I think I did pretty good." I'm like, "But you left me. Like, what's happening?" Like, and he's chuckling, he's laughing, and he goes, "I didn't want to tell you, but we did this house before. Let me see your sketch." And so he takes my sketch and he looks at the sketch that he had done before. Yeah. And praise be to God, I was within quarter inches of all those measurements. And he was like,
goodness, you had good training.
He's like, test passed. And I'm like, all right, cool. But that kind of opened up a door. And, after that day, I was able to train with some of the other guys. We had 15 appraisers, so it was really cool to kind of get with all of them, see the way that they did it, how they did it. Everybody did it different. They had a different process, how they started it, how they finished it, how much they put into it. And I just learned, I was just like a sponge. I just took it all in and thought, you know what, if I'm a guitar player, I want to learn from as many players as I can and draw from that, and that's going to make me who I am as a player. And, that's exactly how I approached the appraisal profession.
Man, Charlie, that totally makes sense. I mean, using the guitar example, I mean, you get a chance to learn from Slash, but then you connect with Greg Allman. Then you're over there with Beck, and then you're coming back to Eric Clapton. I mean, you're just bringing it around. Why just be so narrowly focused? The exposure actually builds your repertoire.
100%. And that's really kind of that's how my training went. So, so then we get close to taking the test. Back then it was a 1,500 hours, I believe it was. Okay. We had to log in with the state. And so that took just under a year, and submitted my log, took the state exam for a licensed appraiser. Now, back then, licensed appraiser, you didn't have to have a college degree.
No.
And everybody that was fine with that credential. So,
it was
as
great.
A firm, it was fantastic. Yeah. As a firm, that was the credential that the staff appraisers settled on, and we just kind of rolled with that. And
love it.
So they got into the biz, and away I go, man.
It's amazing.
And then it just started to change, We got our first digital camera. We got more computers in the office. We still hand wrote for a while until I would say probably it was right around 9/11. So like 2001 is when I think we started to transition from having the appraisals handwritten and typed to the appraiser actually, using the computer to produce their own report on their own.
Yes.
That was our process for a long, long time. And so I moved up the ranks through Metro West. We started to expand, and they opened an office in just outside of Flint, Michigan, up in Grand Blanc. And the guy who opened that up for them, he ended up resigning. And so that job opened up, and they came to me about 3 years after I got credentialed and said, "Hey, do you want to? We need a branch manager up at this location. Do you want to take over?"
Wow.
And so what that entailed is, you were going to oversee that branch. There was 4 credentialed appraisers working there. They had 3 trainees on staff at the time that I was going to have to inherit and start training myself. And so I was like, of course, that sounds like a pretty good gig. And so I took that job, and that really started the next phase of my career, where I really started to focus on, nurturing and training appraisers. And that's probably been one of the most rewarding parts of my career. I mean, there's been a lot of highlights, but I've trained a lot of appraisers in my career through Metro West, and then through the firm I'm with now, Martin & Wood Appraisal. And I'm really proud of that, to have had that opportunity to mold and shape some appraisers throughout the career.
And what was that like being 3 years in? I mean, and some people can definitely relate to that, but a lot of people can't. Maybe because they're not interested, or the opportunity hasn't presented itself to them. I mean, you're working with an established firm. Clearly, there was strong reception in the marketplace. You don't grow to that size if it doesn't have that, and they're expanding. You get tapped again. This time they didn't already have a sketch of the house to walk through, but they had some approach to support you. Share with us a little perspective, what you dealt with and kind of how you had to grow as a professional.
Yeah, that's a great question. So, when I got there was 3 guys that were being trained by the guy who had resigned that I was, filling in for or taking over for. So when I got there, it was, it was really, for me, I remember how I was trained, right? And I felt like I was trained really well. And
got it.
And so, I would really lean on Andy, who, had trained me. We talked a lot on the phone. It was like asking a lot of questions, remembering the things, the kind of like schematic that they had, in place. And we just kind of followed suit. And, that was how I did it. And I felt confident enough. I'm like, I thought to myself, this guy's owned this place for 25 years at this point. I'm like, if he thinks I'm qualified, then I must be qualified. And, and I had some senior appraisers that were in that office that they were super, super willing to help and for me to lean on. And that was the beauty of being an appraiser at an established firm working in an office is that, you weren't just sitting, at your desk. They always say in the basement, that drives me nuts, but you weren't just sitting at your desk and typing an appraisal by yourself. I had 5 other appraisers in the building that if I ran into something, question, I could just knock on the door or just walk in and be like, hey man, what do you think about this? And, everybody would take those questions and we would talk and we would help each other solve problems. And it was the camaraderie and the interaction, physical interaction, with other appraisers, that was awesome. I mean, that was a big bonus of being in that position. So that's what, how I kind of approached it and did it, right? I was never afraid to ask for help. And I always made sure if they had questions, first of all, the first thing I always told every trainee, there's never a dumb question in appraising.
Yeah, that's true.
Never a dumb question. You ask whatever you have a question about. And if you don't understand it, ask. And if you just want to know why, then ask. I'll always answer your question. And if I don't have the answer, I'm going to call somebody who does. And we're going to figure out that problem. And that's kind of how I approached it. But yeah, there was a lot of moving parts back then that are just automated now, right? I mean, the sketch, the verification of data, the picture, we moved on, we're digital photos now, but still the lenders were only requiring front, rear, and street. So, the process, I tell people all the time, like back in the 90s, when I was handwriting appraisals, them with 35 millimeter camera, I could do 6 or 7 appraisals a day if they were grouped properly.
Properly. Yeah. If you got the right mapping, the right kind of, the scheduling was a big piece of it, but assuming there was availability to get into the properties and they were either close together or they were at least maybe along the expressway or what have you, like you weren't going zigzagging all around. I mean, you reduce the drive time per assignment, you have a phenomenal day.
Oh yeah. And the fact that, you could do 6 or 7 a day and handwrite them and still meet a 48-hour turnaround time, because we were always 48 hours from inspection. We were going to turn these around. And if we didn't, then we would contact you and let you know. And that was kind of our motto,
Yes.
And so, and back then it was like, I could write those and get those done. I mean, I couldn't do 6 or 7 appraisals now, even if they were grouped appropriately. Like
you could
today,
you could do 6 property visits in a day.
You certainly could, but you couldn't get them written within 48 hours. You just,
by yourself.
For me, kind of no way. There's just no way. Totally. And which is, to me, it just shows you just how the process has increased for putting together an appraisal. And you would think with all this technology and all this information readily available to you that it would be easier, but it's not the case.
No, it's not. You look at what's required, what requested, what is necessary, some good things, some maybe not so much. But I'm with you on that, Charlie.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's something that I think about quite often, is that how is that possible? But to your point, it's really because of the reporting process has changed, I think, tremendously as far as what is required when it comes to pictures, when it comes to some of the Mickey Mouse stuff that comes in those engagement letters, chasing unicorns.
Yes.
Trying to, put a square peg, round hole.
Oh, yeah.
All of that takes time. And then the constant barrage of, we need updates. Where's this assignment? What's back then, nobody called. When we fired out appraisals, nobody sent them back. Okay. Yeah. If you got a question, back then we didn't even call them revisions. We called them a question. If you got a question on an appraisal, I would literally shut everything down. I'd bring everybody in and be like, hey, the lender has a question. We got to answer this.
Somebody's actually reaching into us.
Yeah, somebody's actually asked about an appraisal I did and wants to know how I came up with this adjustment. I need help. You guys, what do I say? It was and this would happen maybe once every 2 months, once every 3 months, if that.
Those are the days, man. Those are the days.
6 months without anybody calling. Or we want another comp.
Yep.
They want another comp. Why? Why would they want another comp?
Why would they want another comp?
It was just you did it and nobody ever said anything. Nobody ever came back. And all that changed. After about, I would say 09, 08, maybe, leading up to that, it was a whole new ballgame.
Yes.
And we had a lot of ups and downs back then. When I came into the business, we were in a refi boom, and then rates went up, and it was very slow. When I went up to that branch in Grand Blanc, started that part of my career, it was slow. We were out knocking on doors. Back then you had relationships with bankers and lenders, and it wasn't like it was after 08 and the advent of AMCs and all that. I would get invited by loan officers to go to bar mitzvahs and their weddings, and we would hang out and play golf on Fridays, and it was it's a completely different landscape on the relationship part. And I get it. I think a lot of, maybe, I don't know, I guess I don't even want to say a lot. Maybe some appraisers fell victim to that relationship where they would be pressured, and I know that was a big story.
The market right now is tough for appraisal companies. Many companies are having a hard time getting enough work with the same marketing they used to. Is your company struggling, having a hard time getting new customers, or getting additional work from existing customers? The answer to this problem is easier than you think. Do more business with the people you already know. Over 10 years, the average U.S. appraisal firm meets over 17,000 potential customers. That's a lot of people you could be doing business with right now. But it's a big problem if you don't have a proven process to communicate with them. StoryLex turns this problem into an opportunity to grow. Our advanced AI marketing tool can rebuild your contact lists and harvest long-forgotten communications. Imagine reaching out to everyone you've ever met with just one click. For the cost of 1 or 2 appraisals a month, StoryLex helps you reconnect and market to people who already know you, like you, trust you, and want to do business with you. Act now by contacting StoryLex today to turn your business growth dreams into reality. Email appraisal@storylux.com. That is appraisal at STORYLUX.com. And now back to part 2 of the episode.
I got exposed to that when I first came into the profession, and it was fascinating. I won't, how do they say, incriminate the guilty parties?
Yeah.
But I can remember the phone call coming in and they'd call the owner and, hey, this one needs a touch-up. That was their cue. Needs a little touch-up because whatever their LTV was, whatever was going on, wasn't working out. And I was in the office, but he called over into the owner's office and be like, hey, need you to take another look here. They think you probably missed some data. Look, I've been an investor first. My whole background is real estate and ownership, as it relates to, being in Chicago, what have you. So, I really do understand properties at a whole different level than most people. And I'm grateful for that because it all comes from the school hard knocks and painful pocketbook. But, man, there's nothing left. Someone's like, I'm like, look, now, again, it's a range, but that's not even in the range. That's ridiculous. I'm like, look, I take my name off of it. That's fine. You go ahead. It's your business. Take my name off. You sign it. He's like, I don't know if he did or didn't care as long as my name wasn't on it. I'm like, still pay me though. I did the work. But
that's right.
Sadly, that did exist because he had some mortgage relationships, and those mortgage brokers could, like the weather, they could blow in and blow out. And to his credit, he really did take care of them. And that call hardly ever came in, but it came in every so often. And I totally get it. As someone who's invested it a ton and had a lot of conversations, with loan off, talking to your banker, trying, how are we going to structure this? How are we going to get it done? And like, oh, the appraisal didn't come in. I'm like, what the? So, I've been on all sides, many sides of it. And I understand. It's like, is it really not there? I mean, I remember what? $432,000. Like, seriously, are you that good? It's like 433 gets the loan done, and you're telling me it's 432.
Right.
I'm like, look, I'm not that good. Right. Is it in the range? I mean, that's not even 1% difference. Got it. Sure. So I'm with you on that, Charlie. That's phenomenal.
Yeah, that's how I was trained, and that's how I trained. It's like, look, if nobody's that good, and I certainly am not perfect.
Yeah.
And if somebody presents a sale to me that was just as good or better than any of the ones in my report, then I'm not married to this number. Okay. And I have an open mind enough to know that what pressure is and what, hey, can you take a look at this and see if it's worthy to put in your report? Those are two different things. Pressure.
So different.
Pressure is, Gress, I need another $25,000 out of this job or you ain't getting any more work. That's pressure. And I've taken calls like that.
Yeah.
I've taken calls like that. And to your point, it's no. Okay, well, guess what? Then maybe we don't do business anymore, Yeah. And that was how I rolled. Mm-hmm. I wanted this was a gift to me, this whole career,
Yes.
And I was smart enough, thank God, I was maybe raised well enough to know that, my integrity is worth more than that fee on that appraisal. And that's how I looked at it. That's how I operate. That's how I was taught. And, that kudos to my mentors and the people that brought me into this profession, because, that was just how it was. And we didn't fall victim to that. Again, I'm not married to it. And, I wanted to make sure the people that worked with me and that I trained were not so blockheaded about it, because you hear those stories on the lender side where it's like this guy, comes in at 99,000 and it's sold for 102. I mean, it's like really like 3%. Like I just am not that good. The range is 110 to 95.
We have a lot of those FHA ones. I mean, we deal with commercial stuff too, but you're right. Sometimes that's in there, but you also take a step back and say, look at the bigger picture. And sadly, some people, I've dealt with some of them. Some of them work for me over time. Like, that's the number. And I'm like, serious? Are you willing to tattoo that on your body? I'm like, I get it. I'm like, the research is solid, but it's a range. And sometimes you're like 100%, like you were literally, 90. It's not 102. Like it's 99. Right. It's really like 93 to 99. And it's 99. And that's accounting for like moving the market and everything else. I mean, that's such a good point on that, Charlie. And, and that doesn't mean that the sales necessarily, like I need a sale to bracket. I'm like, dude, it's a moving market. Like the next sale is going to be above the current range. So like, oh my goodness.
Right. Well, that's the thing, and when we're in a situation where you're coming in let's say less than contract price on a purchase, you really need to be looking at those pending sales. And that should be part of your analysis where you're like, okay, well, what's pending out there? Yes. And this is what I always taught. Look at your subject, okay?
Yes.
Are you the best house in the block or are you the worst house in the block? And if you're the worst house in the block, then guess what? It's probably at the lower end of that range than as opposed to the higher end. Okay. Yes. When you take all things into consideration. So to me, if I got the best house in the block, and when I say that, I mean newly renovated or just in really good condition in comparison to the comparable sales I'm using, then we're going to the dance. You know what I mean? Like, yes. I'm not going to leave you standing at the altar if that's the case.
Good point.
And you let the house dictate that on how aggressive, if you will. I guess that might be kind of maybe a strong word, but maybe the right word when you're looking at the range of sales low to high. Exactly. If your house is one of those houses that is going to have 2 days on the market and a ton of activity and everybody wants it, I mean, and your range is 93 to 110 and you're calling it 99, it's sold for 102, like, I don't know.
Oh, absolutely.
I'm not that good. I'm just not that good.
Yeah. No, that's I totally agree. I think there's a great sense of place and position, and more importantly, like, look, there's no perfection in all of this. There's more right than wrong, and openness to like, hey, I can learn with you and from you, and also at times, as you touch on, be able to share those learnings with others. And that means that most things are not fixed in stone, although they might be pretty firm. But you know, there's room there. That's phenomenal. So, you know, taking that whole example to the next level, you get this opportunity now to be newer in the profession. You're leading a team. You're also training people up. How did that continue to grow and develop? And how did you continue to grow and develop?
That's a great question. So at that Grand Blanc office, I was there from probably 1999 to 2006. So about 7 years.
All right.
I probably trained, I'm going to guess in that time, 10 to 12 appraisers over that time. And, you know, I just continued to, you know, grow the branch. You know, we went through a couple lean years, but we gained a few clients up there and still continued to grow. And so then in 2006, I received my VA credential. I kept applying for VA, finally got it.
Yeah.
I was super excited. I had one county. It was a very rural county.
All
but
right.
I was like, I don't care. Like, I want to get in. So that's how you got in. And about 6 months after I got it and doing some VA work, which is the most rewarding work I do.
I love that. It's phenomenal.
It really is. And so I
real quick, Charlie, for those people listening, I know there can't be many, but there might be a few. What is VA work? We should not overstep the obvious.
Yeah, right. We can talk about VA.
It's always so obvious.
So it's VA Veterans Affairs. So this is for our U.S. veterans. They are allowed a loan program where they can, you know, get a, you know, less closing costs. It offers a ton of benefits for a veteran to get a home mortgage. And part of that process is they have their own closed panel of appraisers that they work with. And so it's different than, say, getting work from lenders. It's different from getting work from mortgage companies and AMCs, if you will. You're on a closed panel. It's a rotation. If you're in a county, I service 2 counties currently, but so they just run that rotation, and every time you're up, you get an assignment, and it's very similar to an FHA when it comes to the appraisal part of it. You know, it's the minimum property requirements that you got to watch out for. But yeah, it's a great source of work. If you're thinking about getting on it, all you got to do is continue, and I mean continue, to send in your application. Squeaky wheel gets the grease. And I've got 2 stories about VA in my career, but this particular story, I just continued to send that application in monthly and finally got the tap. So yeah, if you're not doing VA work, look into getting on the panel.
Yeah. We look forward, based on some conversations, for someone from the VA to be joining us here on the podcast. But it's very rewarding work, and so much of the work that real estate appraisal and valuation professionals provide does have a meaningful impact. Some of it doesn't. Some of it's just, you know, for accounting purposes or mark to market or something else, which, you know, there are direct lives impacted because of the valuation work that's done for the VA.
Yeah, I agree. It really is. It's great work. So I get this tap for VA, you know, and I'm doing assignments and I'm loving it, and I'm meeting veterans and I'm thanking them for their service. And, you know, I got a dad who's a 100% disabled Vietnam veteran, and I couldn't serve. I wanted to go in the Army. We didn't talk about that, but, you know, I got hit by a car when I was 15 years old, and you know, it's pretty bad. And I wasn't physically able to get in the Army.
You didn't you wouldn't pass the physical portion of the application, if you will, to get in.
Yeah. Wow. So I didn't get to serve. And, you know, so when I got on the panel, it was like, wow, this is my way to serve, you know, and it felt really good inside to be, you know, to be able to fulfill that. And so it's great. And I'm doing this work. And then I get called into this meeting, you know, by at Metro, and Don's like, you know, we're expanding to Florida, and we're thinking about sending you down to Orlando to open a branch in Orlando. What do you think about that? And I'm like, they had already had an office in Tampa that one of my colleagues opened up for them maybe a year prior. So now they wanted to move east into Orlando. And, this is like 06. I mean, things were rocking, we were
06. Things were on fire in 06,
right.
depending on what you were associated with or what you were aware of.
Yeah. And it was a pretty significant pay increase. And anyway, so it was a sweet deal, but I was like, man, I just got this VA approval. I'm like, cause now I got it. If you leave the county you're working in, that's it. You can't transfer it. I called. They were like, no,
I didn't know that.
You can't take it with you. And I was like, so I had to give that up to go down to Florida.
Wow.
And it made sense at the time. And I took it and went down there. And then, I'm there from like end of 06, early 07. And then things started to change, right?
Yes, they did.
So I was in Florida. I trained, I think, 3 appraisers out of that office down there in Florida. And and then everything changed. And it was like, oh boy. Yeah, so that was rough. So I was there for the crash. The lead up to the crash was really interesting in Florida appraising. It was a lot different than Michigan.
Yeah, talk about that, because a lot of people in the Midwest hear stories. It's kind of like every time you travel, for those that have passports and travel internationally, and you meet people and they have their perspective of what either the United States is like or a particular city is like based on, say, the movies. People in Michigan, Chicago, you name it, Kentucky, like it's like not the same as in Florida. And you're in Orlando, hotbed of Disney activity. Talk a little bit about that for everybody's benefit.
Yeah, it was, down there, the housing was different, the style of housing, the property types and such, a lot different than Michigan, a lot of, attached condos, high-rise building condos, a small percentage of townhouse style, the single family houses, everything was, 70s and later. Like, I do a lot of older homes up here where I'm at these days and, outside of Detroit. And it's down there, it was like 70. If you were doing a 1970 house, that was an old house, right? You just didn't get much older than that.
Mm-hmm.
But you had these other just interesting properties. They had these condo-tels, which
condo-tels.
We'd run into that.
Yep.
And just a lot of really interesting type properties. But what I was getting at when I said it was a little different when the crash started is that when as appraisers to that point, I don't think I've ever gotten to a situation where you could just see the writing on the wall. And what I mean by that is that, typically when you're doing your prior sales research, you may have one sale in your grid that sold prior for more than what it's selling for now.
Oh, yeah.
And then you would look at that and you'd find out, it was a relocation or, and that usually was a pretty good indicator. Maybe it's not a good comp, right? You know what I mean? So you move on and find a different sale, after you did that analysis and investigation. But now it was like every sale in your grid had a prior sale that was more than what it was selling for now. And it was just so obvious the market was declining. So now we're checking the declining box, and I can remember taking phone calls from appraisers I trained in Michigan and other areas of Florida, like, hey, are you seeing this? Like, we're declining. And we hadn't seen it in, a decade,
exactly.
We had not seen so everybody was very nervous to check that box. What is this going to mean? And it was like, look, if your analysis is telling you that property is declining, that market is declining, then you got to check the box. You got to explain what your analysis determined. And it was scary because then you had lenders contacting you.
Oh my gosh, the lenders blew up the phone. Oh, that's like, what do you mean you checked the box? My borrower has to put 5 or 10% more down. I'm like, I don't know what your borrower has to do, but dude, property value's going down. It's the way it is.
It was a shift in that whole, what the phone calls were about, what we're doing. I mean,
a lot of phone calls.
How do we as a firm, one thing that was, really cool, and we had this community, it was like a community of appraisers. We would share narratives, comments about different market situations with each other, because somebody was a really strong writer. and maybe somebody else wasn't. And, and that was helpful for them to write their appraisals, that they knew to put in the right narrative that described the situation that they were in. And that was something that we did as colleagues, as we would share comments and we would share narratives, and and people would save them to their pick list. And, it was scary, man. So that crash happened. I remember, that old Black Friday thing. And, it was pretty scary. Volume just shriveled up. You went from boom conditions to absolutely nothing going on, right after the crash. And then it was like, as a strategy, as a firm, we were like, okay, which one of our existing clients is doing foreclosure work, and so we had to shift our whole marketing strategy, our whole appraisals, so that required, me coming off the road, sitting down with different parts of our marketing people and figuring this thing out. And it was, so we got plugged in, and then you start doing foreclosure work. Gosh, some of the most depressing work.
Oh my gosh.
That I've ever done in my career. Oh, you go into these houses and you just see lives destroyed, basically.
These are human beings, like, didn't do anything a lot of times. Not all the time. Almost all the time. Like, just good people. And circumstances that they didn't cause, they don't understand, and they're victim of. I mean, I remember one in particular, wonderful couple. Impressive, talented professionals, really good jobs. And both of them got laid off in the same week. And they're living in this condo, and they're just like, they don't know what's happening. I mean, they know that they don't have income and they can't make their mortgage payment. And they're like, we don't know how long we can be here. We don't know what's going to happen. I mean, it seemed like for some, maybe yourself included, Charlie, did you turn into a therapist?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, you're a part-time therapist over here, for sure.
Oh, my goodness.
And it, just to see that was very, just, I don't want to say depressing, but it wasn't fun. Mm-hmm. Depressing comes to mind, but, you're there to do a job, and unfortunately it's that job. But, it's not like working for the VA and shaking veterans' hands and telling them thank you for your service. It was just seeing the destruction of, what foreclosure means. I've never been exposed to it. This was all new for all of us as appraisers. So that went on. And then, at that point in my career, I'm in Florida. I don't know anybody, you know what I mean? I'm away from family. The crash happens. I was just looking at my situation, and I remember calling, Don, and at this point we're in 12 other states now.
Oh yeah.
And I said, Don, I gotta come home. Do you got something for me to do up there? And he's like, yeah, get your butt home.
Man, that's a true testament to a quality owner.
Oh, he was great. I mean, Don he was a great mentor, and he's a smart businessman and a very, very, very good appraiser, And so anyway, so he says, come home, and they had an opening for a quality control manager. So I came in as that. And then after being there and working with our review staff, because as Metro West grew, we implemented a review process for all the appraisers. And this was, way back before, where a licensed or certified appraiser would look at the report before it went to the client, just to make sure that the sketch was filled out, all the Mickey Mouse stuff that you might miss, in the course of doing volume appraising, right? Mm-hmm. They would help out with that and send it back before the client. So we didn't have the client sending it back and forth all the time. And so I was overseeing that department. And then, and we're growing. I mean, we grew, now they're in 26 states. And so then Don, decided, what, we're looking at all these firms. I just remember I think we were at a CRN, or we were somewhere. We were at a Val Expo, me and him.
Sure.
And he's looking all around. He's like, got all these chief appraisers. We don't have a chief appraiser. You're our chief appraiser. Let's make you our chief appraiser. We need a chief appraiser. And I'm just like, okay. We got all these guys running around, that were chief appraisers, and we didn't have one. So it was like, okay, so now I'm the chief appraiser. So yeah, I got promoted to that. And then I was overseeing, like, at that time, probably 80, 90 appraisers.
Oh, wow.
You know, and then it just became evident that as we're hiring these appraisers, you know, we'd always work with guys we trained, or Don trained, or Andy trained, or I trained. It was like, now you got all these appraisers that were, you know, we don't know who they were trained by, but we're hiring them as staff Metro West appraisers. And at that time, it was becoming very obvious that, you know, and not to knock anybody, but, you know, there's a right way and a wrong way to be trained. And some of these people we were hiring were not trained that well. So we all, everybody at Metro West at that time, we were in a meeting and we were talking about it. And I just said, you know, I think we need a training manual for these appraisers coming in, for some of these, you know, some of these pain points that we're having, either in the review process or, you know, wherever it is. So we identify these and we make a more uniform product that's going to the clients. You know, maybe all the comments are in the same spot because, you know, we would always put things in the same spot on a report, right? So as a firm, I think having that continuity for all your staff is really helpful to the client, because if they know they're getting a Metro West appraisal, they know where their USPAP statements are. They know where their, you know, that nowadays the ANSI statement is. They just know where to find it.
Yes.
And so I sat down with some of the other leadership at the time, and we started putting together this manual, and we called it USMAC, Uniform Standards of Metro West Appraisal Company. And we put this manual together. Yeah, it was really, that was another highlight for me for sure, is putting that together. And then Don and I went on a road show to all these states where we hired new appraisers, and we had them come in and we spent a day with them, and we just basically held a class like USMAC, you know, or USPAP, right? So it was USMAC, and it was an opportunity for us to meet them face to face. It was also an opportunity for us to share our expectations as a staff appraiser for Metro West. And that was really a cool part of my career, was doing that and being a part of that. And I had a lot of help. I mean, I didn't write it by myself. I don't want to give the wrong impression.
No, but you were part of a group effort. It's clear the whole effort there has always been team oriented.
It was. And man, it was just a really cool way to, you know, to come together and to share information with people that maybe didn't have the best mentor. Let's just leave it at that. And so that worked out really well. And then, so we grew to like 100, and now we're up to like 150 appraisers maybe now.
Like in size almost.
And this is around 2010. And, you know, I just got to a point in that career where, you know, emails, you know, you got at that time, I don't know if I was in a BlackBerry still. I think I was. You know, you're getting emails at home. I mean, I'm getting like 400 emails a day. I mean, it was just a constant barrage. Sure. I had to bring on, we brought on one of my guys that I actually trained to be what we call the compliance officer, because I needed help. It was like, there were so many calls coming in, because I wanted these appraisers to know that if they ever had a question, or if they were running into something that they weren't sure of, they could call me. And I made myself very available. But what that did is it created a really overwhelming, you know, barrage of calls and emails. And so I just started to feel a burnout coming on, and I felt like I needed a change. And I'd met Ken Wood, the guy I work for now, at Val Expo, and he was he would send us some work up in Michigan, where he was based out of Toledo, Ohio. Okay. He didn't come as far north as where we were, and he would send us some work sometimes. You know, hey, you know, I got a client, they need this job done. You guys want it? They called it farm out work, whatever.
Yeah, farm. Yeah, sure.
And just a great guy, and I really hit it off with him. And I had heard through the grapevine that, you know, he was transitioning his work into, or he had transitioned his work into commercial and right away, and he really needed some help with someone overseeing his residential department. And it just sounded like a good fit. And I went and met with him, and we hit it off. And so I resigned from Metro West in 2011. Wow. And I've been working for Martin & Wood Appraisal now we're at 13 years now as their chief appraiser.
That's great.
We got like 9 appraisers. It's a much smaller operation.
Wow. It's like beginning, back when you took on that first little office, and it was you, 3 people and 3 trainees.
That's right. And when I'm in the field, I got back on the VA panel after constant barrage and I actually ran into the head of the VA at a Val Expo and cornered him.
He goes to those.
Yeah, and I cornered him, and I told him I was on the panel before, and I gave him the whole story about my dad, and he said, "Give me your card." He said, "No, and here." He goes, "Take my card. The next time you email your application, CC me." And I said, "Okay, you got it." Cool. So I came home.
I appreciate it.
And he was like, "This guy's been on the panel before. I think we should give him a look." And lo and behold, 2 months later, I'm back on the panel. So
the power of relationships, Charlie, the importance of getting out and meeting people and just sticking out your hand and saying hello and sharing some story.
That's it.
Wow. You also have had some other interesting opportunity to contribute to the profession. You want to share a little bit about that?
Yeah, I would love to. So, when I got to Martin & Wood, we were based out of Toledo. And so, at the beginning, I had a non-compete with Metro West, and I wanted to be respectful of that.
With Don and everything.
And so I went down to Toledo, and I worked as a review appraiser down there. I just reviewed the residential work, got familiar with the guys,
sure.
Spent the term of that non-compete down with them. And we had an organization send us an email, the Ohio Coalition of Appraiser Professionals. So they're coming to Toledo for a meeting, and we should show up. And I talked to Kenny. I said, "Hey, I think I'm going to check this out." He's like, "Good, go do it." And so I went, and it was great. It was like two guys, like we're talking right now, but there was a group of them, and sharing information, and it was just the way that they presented it. They were talking to legislators about AMC regulation and legislation that was going to be put through regarding the term legislation. It's killing me right now. So anyway, I was really interested in it, and I said, if you guys need someone to do this Toledo thing, because he was coming from Cincinnati, and I'm like, I'd be happy to kind of do this for you guys up here, and so they took my card, and then the next thing you know, I get a phone call a couple weeks later. And they were like, "Hey, can you come down to Cincinnati to meet with, the board?" And I'm like, "Okay, when?" And they're like, this, next Friday night or something. So I drive down to Cincinnati and I go to this little restaurant, and, the board's there. It was really kind of cool. I walk in and they're talking. And so we sit down, we're eating dinner. And then at some point, one of the board members says to me, "Hey, would you, we think that you are an awesome fit, and we haven't found nobody's emerged that quite meets your credentials, and hey, we need a president in 2014. Would you be interested in doing that?" And I said,
"Congratulations."
I was like, absolutely. So I got involved with them, and that kind of blossomed. I started looking out at other states, like who else is doing this. And I got in touch with a guy named Peter Gallo out of North Carolina.
Yeah, he's been on the podcast.
Pete, he was
love Pete,
man, amazing guy.
Yep.
One of the true superstars I've met out in the profession of appraising. And so anyway, I got in touch with him. We started writing white letters. He started to put together an organization of organizations, if you will, and we called it NSAO, the National Appraiser. We had a name for it. Anyhow. Yeah. So we all get together, and we would meet, and we would typically meet on the coattails of Arrow.
Yes.
Because we knew a lot of other, organizations were going to be there. And it was, that was probably one of the best times of my career, was being involved in that and traveling with those guys and meeting other people like Joe Meir from Louisiana.
No, Joe's great too.
And that was, again, it takes me back to my roots, right? When I was a young pup, and I'm in that office, and I said, I want to work with some of the other appraisers. And it takes it back to that guitar reference where it's like,
yes.
Where did Jimmy Page get inspired to play that blues like that? What was he listening to? Right. Mm-hmm. But it's the same thing. It's like, I want to learn how other appraisers were doing it in other parts of the country, and to have that interaction of ideas and methodology and experience. was, it's made me who I am today as an appraiser. And I'm so grateful to have had all those opportunities along a really stellar career.
That is fantastic. That is great to hear. What a lot of people have not had an opportunity, Charlie, to serve in the capacity, like with OCAP, the Ohio Coalition of Appraisal Professionals. For you, obviously you're passionate about it. You can really sense your enthusiasm for it. How did that contribute to you as a professional? And why would you encourage other people to do it? Because ultimately, representation is what it always comes down to. And that means all of us have 168 hours in the week. Yeah, it's about 700 in the month. And we're going to choose where some of it's going to go. Sleeping and eating are two big ones. Doing work that gets us compensated is another. But there's always space in there to contribute maybe some amount of time to other initiatives. Share with us your perspective on that.
Yeah, that's a great question, man. So, for me, when I got involved with that coalition, it allowed me to build relationships and learn about things that were happening within the profession and on a more, specific level. And what I mean by that is, you started learning about the what Fannie Mae, who they report to. Yeah. You just started learning more about the intricacies about who it is that oversees us, who it is that is reviewing our appraisals. So it opened up this side of the profession that I hadn't seen. And what that allowed me to do was to be able to think about, okay, well, if I'm writing this appraisal, I think for, let's just say, ABC lender, but ultimately Fannie Mae is the one who's setting the expectations. It really allowed me to understand the process of who's digesting the work that I'm completing and what is their expectations. And it got me closer to that, and it really exposed me to it, right? And I think from an appraiser's perspective, even within my own staffs over the years, what I hear from them and why they don't participate in these things is time. Number one answer, time. And you nailed it. Yeah. And Ernie Durbin once told me this
Another great
a long time ago.
Yeah, a great guy.
So grateful to have that man in my life. He once told me that as an appraiser, you need to start looking at what your billable hours are. Yeah. As opposed to just, I'm getting paid this percentage or I'm getting paid this fee for this job. And if I do 2 in a day, that's great or what. Instead of looking at it that way, you got to start converting that into your billable hours. How many hours did it take you to complete that assignment? And it works with bidding your assignment, right? When you're, when you're trying to get one in the door, but it also allows you to understand what your time is worth. And so, when you're talking to appraisers who are working on a per job basis, they're not making a salary. They're not being paid to go to these extracurricular professional activities. But if they were to understand that your billable hours are X amount of dollars an hour, if you just took 1 or 2 of those hours and put it into becoming a better professional, it might increase your billable hours, or your billable fee per hour, right? And that's something that I would encourage anybody listening to is are you doing this to retire at it? And do you want to be a better professional? Then reach out to your local coalition. Yes. Reach out to the Appraisal Institute. Reach out to these organizations, the Appraisers Society, the Society of Appraisers, whoever it is. Join them, man, because in the end, there's a lot of information, education, experience, methodology, information that can be shared with you that is going to make you a better professional. And that's helped me tremendously over my career.
I really appreciate you sharing that. I mean, Charlie, given everything you've seen, everything you've experienced, everything you've come across, what are you looking forward to or optimistic about over the next 3 to 5 years?
Well, the first thing that comes to mind is, obviously it's been a down year, if you will. And if you've been doing this as long as we have, we're in the trough. We're going to come out of the trough. Okay. And So I'm hoping to see volume and rates, do their thing and get things generating again. I have a lot of optimism for the future. One thing I didn't share with you is when I went to that first class in Houston, back in 96, the instructor, his opening remark to the class of about 55 people, if I remember correctly, was, I don't know what you guys are all doing here. None of you are going to have a job in 5 years. Computers are going to do the work for you. And this is
Thank you,
27
Mr. Instructor.
Yeah, 27 years ago. And I just remember looking at the guy next to me going, did he just say that? Like, did it?
Oh, my goodness.
But again, we've been hearing this for years, and everybody's afraid of change. And, if you don't change, you're going to die,
Yep.
I mean, that's really the reality of it. And what I do is I embrace the change. So I think that, all these things that are happening in Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac world with regards to, the new valuation method, if you will.
Yes.
How they're going to change the reports. They're going to eliminate the reports, and it's going to be more of a process. I'm looking forward to that. And I think that, the average age of an appraiser these days is probably about 68. I know that, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac look at that. That means 10 years, you're going to have guys pushing 80. How many, and gals, how many appraisals are they going to be doing? Yeah, I've been doing it 27 years, but I'm only 48 years old. So as a younger professional in this business, in comparison to my colleagues, I'm excited. I mean, and I've trained 2 appraisers in the last 2 years. So, I want to continue to train appraisers and bring them into the profession. And I think that this is, it's been a great career for me. It could be a great career for anybody coming in. I don't fear any of it that's coming. I still think no matter what happens, there's still going to be a need for a credentialed professional appraiser in the market space, no matter what happens. I believe that. And until whoever they is, say otherwise, then I'm going to be happy doing what I'm doing, man.
I love that. That's such a strong, positive note to end on. One that I, many ways, agree with. And I just want to say, Charlie, thank you so much for joining us. This has been a phenomenal, fast-paced episode. We appreciate it.
Oh, man, it's been my pleasure. And, thank you for having me. And, if any of the guys that trained me or anybody who knows me from the past is listening, thank you for being a part of my life and making me the professional I am today.
I really received that, Charlie, and I'm grateful for you being a guest. And of course, I encourage you to extend the gratitude that Charlie is putting out there, and who are 2 or 3 people that have contributed in your life that you could share. Maybe it was somebody who was named in this podcast, but maybe it's somebody else. So don't miss the opportunity to pass along the gratitude in the form of this podcast. So with that, we'll bring this episode to a close. And again, Charlie, on behalf of Perusing's The Power of Values, thank you very much.
Thank you, man.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of Perusing's Appraisers on Purpose. We hope you enjoyed learning from the amazing professional paths and achievements of our beloved guests. Before we go, please subscribe on your listening channel, Spotify, LinkedIn, YouTube, and other podcast channels to hear more from appraisers and valuers regarding their life and their work. After you drop a comment below, who is one friend and peer you can generously share this episode with? If you have any suggestions or questions for future episodes, we'd love to hear from you. Just send us a message on LinkedIn and we'll be sure to get back to you. Thanks again for listening, and until we're together again for the next session of Perusing's Appraisers on Purpose, create the change that you seek.